Sadly, we are also running out of time. So we have to look to try and wrap things up. Let me get all of your final thoughts before we go, and perhaps we can frame it in a particular way as well, especially as all four of our guests are esteemed experts in their field. What advice would you give to the new president? Dr. Bong, let me start with you, especially when it comes to dealing with North Korea.
Not just regard to North Korea, but his leadership in general. And he should be able to reflect upon himself and what is said. I think President-elect Yoon has the sufficient capability to make changes and adjustment, and the courage and wisdom to admit when he is not right. Because gender issue, right? And the North Korean policy and appointing right people in the right places. I mean, he cannot be perfect as a political leader and a human being, but if he has a reasonable level of humble attitude and candidacy to admit mistakes and courage to make corrections, then he'll be fine. But if not, then we have to pray harder every morning.
Let me turn to you next, Mr. Friedhoff. What advice would you give to the new president? What key issues do you think that he needs to look out for in the coming months, especially?
So on the key issue, I think he's going to be caught in this place where he's going to have to match Korea's policy to increasing global expectations. Right? For a long time, when there has been global issues, Korea has often said the right things, but has then sought to protect its economic interest. We saw this again with the Moon administration right at the outbreak of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where one of the very first statements that we heard out of the administration was that Korea, I think the quote was, had no other choice but to go along. That was not the messaging that Europe or the United States was looking to hear from the administration. And I think, as much as we talk about a changing era or a new era in Europe after Russia's aggression, I think it's also going to be a new era for democracies around the world and for Korea especially. And so he's going to confront this new world where he may have to make commitments and confront economic trade-offs in a way that no Korean president has ever had to do. And the challenge is going to be how he is able to explain that to his constituents here in South Korea.
Let me turn to you next, Professor Cho. What kind of presidency do you at least hope to see over the next 5 years? What would you want to tell President Yoon?
There are two different things. What kind of presidency do I hope to see, and what would like
Did
to?
You have a
what
choice?
I'd like. I was actually
Professor
thinking
Cho,
about
advice. Yes, let's go with advice then.
So, please don't listen to shamanic advices when making important decisions.
Right. I second.
Right. Okay.
No.
This is the issue of whether he practices shamanism or not.
Do not involve non-public office holders when making really important strategic decisions. I am concerned that partner of Yoon might exercise much greater influence simply because access to Yoon, I think, is likely to be quite restricted also. Thirdly, I really would like him to learn the difference between humanism and feminism better, and really figure out what humanism actually means and what feminism is. Take some introductory economics lessons and don't just rely on 30-year-old economic theories that you might have read in your youth. Those are my advice.
Right. Okay. So very specific advice indeed. Professor Kim, we'll give you the last word.
Thanks. I was talking to my American friends and Japanese friends this morning about the election, and what they mentioned was that they are basically very envious of Korean politics. Despite all the disgusts and hatred and self-hates and everything that's going on inside Korea by Korean people about our own politics, my American friends and Japanese friends were very envious of Korean democracy, which they believe is very dynamic. Change of the ruling party after 5 years. They thought every 10 years was the rule here in Korea, but now it's after 5 years. In the eyes of my Japanese friends, it's an extremely dynamic, vibrant democracy. In the eyes of my American friend, he couldn't believe the margin, 0.73 point. With that, there was no civil war. There was no call for recount. in the eyes of my American friends, this is extremely mature and stable democracy. So there's a lot of things that we should be proud of. And so with that in mind, as long as this novice, President-elect Yoon, comes in with all these ideas that we mentioned in this program before, throughout the program, humility and openness, he has a chance to become successful and to make our democracy even stronger going forward.